We have a full agenda today, so I want to go ahead and call our meeting to order. This is the regular monthly meeting of the Portland Human Rights Commission. And I wanted to start out with giving folks the opportunity to introduce themselves. So we will go this way first. So Christine.
Hi, I'm Christine Montal. I'm a commissioner.
I'm Amy Samara Preskup. I am a commissioner.
Lloyd Good, commissioner. Kyle Bessie, commissioner.
Donna Maxey, commissioner.
Yalo Bennett, commissioner.
Abdul Majidi, commissioner.
Hector Lopez, commissioner.
Alan Lazo, I am the chair of the Portland Human Rights Commission. And we'll also have the folks who are visiting with us here today introduce themselves if they'd like.
I'll start in this corner. I'm Mike Tabor, and I'm filming as Joni Letty.
I'm Renee Nichols, and I'm
I'm Mary Nichols. I'm with the Occupy Portland Vigil at City Hall for Ending the Camping Ban, and I'm filming for Vigil TV.
My name is Gwen Barnard. I'm with the Church of Scientology, and I'm also with United Nations Association Portland Chapter Vice President.
I'm Dawn Easter, and I'm with the Portland Commission on Disabilities, Public Outreach and Awareness.
Matthew James, I'm the director of the Office of Equity and Human Rights.
Joe Wall, assistant director.
I'm Judith Lowry. I'm policy analyst for the Office of Equity and Human Rights, and I can only stay for part of the meeting, so excuse me when I leave. It's not because of the meeting.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so let's take...
Hi, Loretta.
So on tonight's agenda that you have in front of you, we're going to make at least one change to it. And then you also have, before you the minutes from the August meeting also. Okay. So first off, on the agenda, item number 5, the HRC chair and vice chair elections. We are making a small change to the terms of chair and vice chair. So previously, the chair, we're not sure the history of this. The chair and the vice chair positions that served with their first meeting in October, and then we would change in October. But it didn't make sense because the commissioner terms end on October 31st. So, and there's nothing about it in the bylaws, we couldn't find the history of it. So what we'd like to do is have the new chair, HRC chair and vice chair, start their term at the same time new commissioner seems to make sense to us. So we would actually, so the next chair would actually start their first meeting as the November meeting, which means that we don't need to do elections tonight. So is there any discussion around that change, which means that I get to serve a 13-month term?
Power grab.
It's a power grab for that extra month meeting. Yeah, it just made sense. We're not sure. We think it's just something in the past history about the way terms ran. That's just the way the elections happen.
Do we need to change our bylaws?
No, that's what I was saying. Is there's nothing in the bylaws other than we shall elect a chair and a vice chair each year.
Mr. Chairman, could you restate the question one more time?
Actually, it's not so much a question as it's a statement that we will, so that the chair, HRC chair and vice chair term will begin in November to coincide with the commissioner terms, which also end on October 31st. So that being the case, then we won't do elections tonight. We'll do nominations and elections at our October meeting, and then the new officers will start their positions at the November meeting. So you can amend your agenda to take out number 5 for this evening, which helps us because we have a very full agenda. So we won't try to adjust it otherwise, or adjust itself accordingly. So other than that change, are there other changes to the agenda for tonight?
Well, we might consider a different time for Teresa Rayford.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm about to text her to see perhaps if they're on their way.
Yeah.
But if they are, it might give them some more time.
Where would you think that would make the most sense?
Maybe we can just keep pushing it back
Push,
one.
keep moving it down one?
No.
Okay. Okay. So let's do that. We will continue to hold the space for the presentation and discussion from the Sons of Haiti Lodge and the Portland Black History Project. And we'll just move up other items as necessary. You want to bring that up? All right, and then also before you, you had in your original packet before you, the top of it says City of Portland Human Rights Commission, and the mission is there, and that is your August minutes. It is one page, two-sided. So if you could take a look at that and see if there are any items, any substantive changes to the August minutes.
Maybe we should ask them to try desperately hard to get there, although I was not present.
Duly noted.
You weren't there when you texted me asking me where I was?
I was trying to get there.
It was a confusing
I thought
place to
you
get
were
to.
there
wasn't like,
asking me
why
where I
aren't you
was.
here? It was, where are you?
I'm like, I'm my house closing.
Listen,
Where
I
are you?
tried on both sides of the river to get there, so.
I felt bad. I was like, oh my God.
How's that?
Oh, I see. So the org chart handout that you have is also an attachment to the minutes. So that's not confusing. Although we'll use it. All right, so the minutes and the agenda, I would entertain a motion to accept today's agenda and last month's minutes.
Hey, Alan,
Yes.
can I mention something about the
Sure.
public comment?
Yeah.
It says witnessed and documented by Dan Handelman of Portland Cop Watch. He wasn't involved in that at all. His name was brought up in the video, but he was not witnessing or documenting.
Ah, thank you.
So you could just cross that little part out. I was witnessing and documenting, but Dan wasn't. And that's it.
So you could just remove documented by Dan Hamlin and put in witnessed and documented by Mike.
Yeah.
Okay.
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second one then? All in favor of accepting the minutes and as amended?
I only did the agenda.
Oh, you'll leave the agenda?
I mean, I can do both. Fine, I'll amend my motion to include the agenda and minutes.
All those in favor of accepting tonight's agenda and the minutes of our August meeting by show of hands as an aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Donna abstains. Okay. So we will so let's save the presentation on the Sons of Haiti Lodge as well as public comments, since we have that listed at 4:30. We'll take it closer to that time in case anybody's going to come in to, since that's what time was on for. So maybe we could move on to item number 6, which is some discussion around, and we'll, I think, go ahead.
My only comment on that is that that's slated for 40 minutes, and if we're going to stop in about 15 for public comment and/or for the presentation, I'm just asking if we want this discussion to be split up.
Actually, that's what I was going to suggest. There are actually 2 pieces there, and so that's what I would suggest, is we start with the first piece and see where we are on our guests, and then and try to do it in two different pieces, that would be a good spot to. So we'll break at about 4:35 to take public comment at that time. So let's do the first piece of that, which is the piece that we've been working on that had previously been referred to as the Memorandum of Understanding, and has been retitled as the OEHR and HRC Working Agreement. And I passed out a copy of a draft of that to you in your packet. And I know we didn't get this to folks prior to this meeting, but substantively, it's similar to what we've seen in the past. We've tried to edit it down to make it a little more concise and a little more clear, and it's down now to about 4 pages. So do folks want a couple minutes to look through what you have in front of you? Yes. We'll talk about that in a second. Folks are mostly through. So again, we'll go back and talk a little bit about the intent of this document. Our hope was just, and there's a group that's been working on this with Amy and Myra and Ashley and I worked on this document at several points, mostly Amy and Ashley and Myra. The idea was to bring forward a document that could capture how we wanted to move our relationship with the office forward, what those elements are, and what pieces we would agree to incorporate into that relationship. So, and we've started with kind of a bigger document that's kind of winnowed down to this document that you have in front of you. Our hope is that it's at a point where this group and then Dante can agree that the document reflects what we want in that relationship and then how we move it forward. So I also invite Dante to join us at the table if you want to for this discussion. I think what we want to know is, does this reflect for folks the conversations we've had about how to move that relationship forward? Are there, and then we'll also hear from Dante his perspective on the document and our relationship. So are there any comments? Tom?
Maybe I missed it, but a question I have is about mediation. Should there be some disagreement or disharmony in moving forward? If there's something in there about that, I didn't see it.
There was previously. I took it out because I'm not sure that we need a process defined in here that's separate from kind of what we would expect to do to resolve differences between us and the office, which is, to me, the ultimate mediator is city council, essentially. It's the body that, to some degree, governs both us and the office.
About that. I think it is always very helpful and not leave room for translation or conflict when there is a clear process of disagreements or if there is conflict between me and another officer or me or somebody else. What's the next step? And I think we need to discuss it here, leave it or not.
Okay.
So for me it is really important in this communication more for the future. Otherwise I will define myself what means negotiation and coming to solve an issue or problem. One will have a different way of doing it, and then we are becoming confusing the whole system, plus confusing the director of office of operations, confusing the city council member, prayers or others. So it's always helpful having a clear step-by-step what we need to do in that case.
As the city council set up, is that part of the protocol? Is that part of their role with this in our relationship to play that? Or would that be something that we would have to solicit and establish a new process for?
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I would. Yeah, I'm not sure. And I guess I would back up and not necessarily say city council overall, because I don't think there is a process at city council. So I guess what I actually mean there is probably the commissioner in charge of this office is sort of the first level up in that chain, and ultimately above that is the full city council. So.
And based on our history, with our presiding commissioner, it seems like for sure we need to have a structure of mediation. I'm not telling you it's going to go forward, but there have been misunderstandings in the past, and I think we need to be very clear for us, for everybody else in the public as well.
Okay. I guess one of the things I'm concerned about is I'm not sure that this document is the place for that.
Maybe just so we can have this document as a communication of funding, whatever, but we have to have something else later on attached to it or add to it that clarifies this. Otherwise, we feel that we can, it's going to save our time. So my suggestion is, we must have it, because it's, there is no the way future things it's solved. But either we can attach it later, or we can put a frame time on how we are going to do it, and we can just attach it to this policy.
Yeah. Just an idea for type of mediation. I know that in mediation, what you're supposed to do is be able to speak about what the other person is saying, and vice versa. Why not just have a meeting time where we're able to talk other than, or it could be, we could have staff set aside for when we could just discuss where we think this person is going, where we are trying to go, and whatnot. Just a meeting time.
One of some suggested in MOUs that I've created in the past, oftentimes for each point made, I've done a what if then section. So just for each point saying, okay, what if this happens? What if this fails to happen? Then this is going to happen. And just adding that element into the MOU is really helpful in terms of continuity among HRC members, and as we turn over, as staff turns over, the document clearly draws out, what that looks like. So it's just a recommendation there. That has strengthened some of the MOUs that I've created in the past.
I like that idea because it picks the situation and gives guidelines on that. And as Kristen said, we're not always going to be here.
And it's also it's very brief. It's not like, what if 500 things happen and then you've got 500 solutions come up. It's like, an example is in my organization, what if the center does not adopt the foundation budget? Then the foundation finance committee reconvenes and recasts its budget to re-present to the center. And that process goes back and forth until the budget is accepted. It's just a very quick what if then type of thing.
I guess my suggestion would be that that's a next step to this, and partly why I wanted to move this away from being this MOU or contract, to have it be more of a kind of a starting place in the agreement about how we're going to work. I think that was the original intention, to me anyway, about what we were trying to develop here. Since we were at a place where the office was new, we'd come from a place that was different to us, that this was that starting point of developing that relationship, not necessarily the end-all, be-all. That's one way that we might look at this particular case. So that's one maybe bring Dante in here, see if you had some thoughts that might help us move forward also.
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate, one, the work that's gone into this. I know everybody's had a good piece of opportunity to weigh in on this. Taking a lot of time to put this together, and I appreciate that. A couple things. One, I don't know, quite honestly, to what extent this would be in any way binding on any commission, no matter what I sign. Because come January 1, I expect that this office will be under a different commission for the mayor. No matter who gets elected, both mayoral candidates that I've met with have said they're going to keep this office. And so I don't know that anything that I sign would be in any way binding on anybody who's a commissioner, first of all. Second, my overall thought for putting an MOU together is that it reflects most specifically and almost exclusively that it's based on the idea that the offices will work together, function, play well together. And more detail isn't what I'm looking for, quite honestly. And I recognize that I recognize where this document for many of you needs to come from, and I appreciate it. I also think that in the 4.5 months I've been here, I have been able to reflect the way that we will work together in the future. And I hope that has come across as in a positive manner. One of non-interference, I guess, is the majority of what I want to say. And I don't want this to come across or be viewed as any way an adversarial document. I mean, I don't want to have a contract with the remedies and all these kinds of things, because in my mind it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Okay, and so my hope and desire is, and there's some things in here I promise I wouldn't sign. I wouldn't sign. Because I'm not going to hamstring either myself or any future person who sits in my seat from functioning in a way that they determine to be best. And so my hope is that, I mean, it reflects the working relationship between us, that it's a positive environment, that there will be communication, there will be collaboration, there will be support, there will be A, B, C, D in that regard. The more details that go into this, the less I want to sign it. And that's just my honest answer.
Can I ask you a question? Is this the first time that you've been brought in to reflect on this and participate in the creation of this?
Well, I didn't create. In the creation of it, I had nothing to do with it.
Right, that's my question.
Amy and Myra met with me after the longer document, right? And then I offered my feedback to both of them, and then this document was created. They sent me this, and I haven't responded to them. I've been in and out and just didn't get to it. And then I met with Alan and Kyle, and basically said we would come here and have this conversation over this document. So I have not responded to this specific document.
Okay, it's just been in my experience that more of a collaborative effort between the two entities creating this document that it sounds like happened from your comments just now.
Like I said, I mean,
Because it's something that serves you as well as serves us, and it doesn't sound like it's serving you very well.
No. I think it's, let me just give you an example, if that would be helpful. On page 2, where'd it go?
What's the topic? Maybe we can help find it.
You know, it was that we would share in any change in structure or focus or mission.
Oh, yes.
Here's the very last bullet
point.
point.
Yeah.
Okay. That each organization will involve the other in decisions that would mark significant changes in the other structure, staffing efforts, or purpose, and both continue to refer to the MOU to help guide collaborative work. I might not have anything to do with the change of the mission. You know, I mean, it can come from the commission. It could come from any number of places. Or could come from budgetary issues. It could come from, you know, an internal strategic planning that my staff has, and we want to do this as opposed to this. I mean, so there's just some things that I'm not going to go and ask the world to help me answer. I wouldn't do this with the Commission on Disability. I wouldn't do this with DEEP. I wouldn't do it with the CDC. I'm not going to do it with HRC. So, I mean, I just think that the details become more problematic the more detailed they become. And again, I recognize the genesis of the concerns for the need for the document. And maybe none of you have any reason to trust me at this point.
Can I make a comment here?
Please.
That bullet, in my understanding, to be in a leadership or a leader when you have a decision that will reflect a group of population or a unit that a person oversees. will take into consideration input and decision of that group how to change it, that unit. So what I'm hearing from you is no.
No.
You make your decision, you make your call, you
No.
don't involve human rights if you're changing the structure of human rights.
No.
Commission. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not how I read this. I read this as if it says, if my office is making changes to its own structure and staffing,
You mean equity?
yes,
Oh.
you get to tell me if that's okay or not. And that's how I read it. If I'm reading it wrong, tell me.
It just says attention will be given by each organization to involve the other in decisions that would.
Right.
Changes of the other structure.
And like our structure.
I understand how you'd be cautious, or that if and any commissioner can correct me, if this come in and I'm going to tell you who to select to be your assistant, or how to make a decision about a contract we need to give to a construction company to make equity, I will be ignored as me come and telling you you have to discuss with me or the commission. This is more about things that involve human rights or human rights commission in decision making as a partner, both of us in the same office. That's what I'm reading this document, the whole document to be like.
Okay. And again, okay. Even if that's the case, if there would be, yeah, I guess the short answer is yes. If I was going to say, next year you have a total of $5,000 for your budget, that's a conversation I'm going to come have. That's a conversation I'm going to have. Now,
What would work best for you?
well, kind of what I described, which is a much more general document that describes the working relationship, and that each entity will endeavor to communicate, collaborate, share, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Then that's all that needs to be in here then.
That's what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying.
The reason I brought up this point of mediation, since I'm the one who brought it up, is that I want us to have a clear understanding that if there are any issues that we don't agree upon, that we have a process, we have the right, we will make an attempt to discuss. Not to push it under the, push it under the rug, not to say, okay, I have the power of this, but that there will be discussion.
In terms of me, there always will. I guess then that begs the question of what kind of disagreements are now going to be in that mediation request. I mean, how detailed are we going to get?
All I'm saying is that there be some kind of statement that should there be some disagreement about any of the above points, that the director of the OEHR and the executive committee or the director of the HRC will sit down and discuss it to work out a settlement to be mutually beneficial. That's all. I just want to make sure that, I don't, I've been burned. And so all I just want is some language to say there will be discussion.
I want to be mindful of time and just get a couple other comments in, and then let's talk specifically about how we move forward on this.
Donna, whether there be a MOU or not, what you're suggesting would still be critically important for the state, because you never know at which point there will be some sort of not meeting of the mind, in other words, to that. I think what's important, whether we do it through an MOU or whether we do it through more informal ways, still the reality that this commission is not similar to anything else in the structure of the city government. And that continues to cause the edge that exists and will continue to exist unless this commission becomes exactly like all the other commissions within city government. And that there will be no more discussion. But as long as there is the understanding around this table from the beginning that as much as possible, given the structure of city government, this is an autonomous body. And no one is really autonomous, obviously, but that this, basically that the life that we have is ours by mandate, by origination, and by creation. And as we struggle to maintain that, we've come up against, I think, good, meaning people who understand their job differently than what we understand our reality. So I don't begrudge a commissioner who wants to manage us, because according to the charter, according to the city structure, if this commission falls under my bureau, you do as I say. So there's that possibility always, even if it, as Dante says, if this comes under the authority of the new mayor, it still may be a problem somewhere down the road. And I agree, at this point there may not be a problem. But given the tension that exists just by ownership and definition, it may come up again. And what do we do? Do we go through another 18 months of paralysis? Or do we have a good way of adjudicating and resolving the issue, whether it be with city council or whether it be amongst ourselves or with the Office of Equity? Some sort of process will be critically important to us.
I don't think we've actually spoken about this, but I met with Amy and Myra early on, and was one of the first people that actually thought an MOU might be a good idea, with complete understanding that any draft that was completed would go under multiple revisions and maybe never even be something that's used. But I just wanted to share, if it hasn't been shared already, that at least from my perspective and intention, this was really, the impetus is really coming from a place of wanting to work more collaboratively and not in reaction to past so much as just creating a foundation for the future. And so that's where I was coming from in drafting this, or co-drafting this, and I think it's in much better form now. I think we'd be amenable to some changes. Of course, that's up for discussion, but I just want to be clear that we just wanted to get something committed to paper for eyes to see and revisions to take place and just a starting point. And I personally look forward to positive working, collaborative working relationships and seeing where we can be stronger together and recognize when we're different and just have that acknowledged. So that's where I was coming from in this, and just wanted to clarify.
No, and I appreciate it. And I honestly didn't take it in any negative way. I took it as a positive effort to try to create a positive working relationship, but I also sensed that the need to define and protect yourselves was based on past. And at least that was my impression. That's where a lot of this came from. Not a lot, but where some of this came from. And so I understand the need for self-protection and self-preservation. And I try not to take this personally because I know my thoughts on how I want the commission to work. And I've already defended the commission to commissioners who have questioned already what you've been doing. And I said, that's what they're going to do. And I've got nothing I'm going to say to them about that. And so, for me, at some point, at the end of the day, I can sign this all day, okay? But whoever the commissioner in charge is could still do what they want to do. And so I guess my question to you is this designed for me in my office? Is it designed for the next step beyond me in my office? And if it's designed purely for me in my office, then design it in a way that is a general statement of how you want us to work together. Again, I think about my successor and who that may be or who may not be, but what I would give to them as well, and I have to be cognizant of kind of infringing upon what their possibilities may be and how they see this rolling out. Not that it would impact or infringe on the commission, but just on how they manage and how they do what they do. So I'm not looking at it just from me, I'm looking at it from the next step out as well.
Good. I think that I want to cut off the session here, and I think Ashley's point is a good one. I think that gives us some direction on what we're going to do is sort of return to the document in the words and make sure it reflects both the original intention from our side and what we're hearing in the work from Dante's side. So I think we'll be on a table it for the moment and figure out how to move forward from here. Suit everyone well?
So how about next steps look like?
I think, for me, this is the first time maybe that we're sitting and trying to understand. I think this is very, very crucial. It's not 2 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes, or 20 minutes. For me, I would like to put on the table that we need to continue this discussion. We're not ready. Personally, for me, with all respect to everybody here, including you, I would say we are done. You are not going to silence. We are in the wrong path. We are done. But I don't want to go that way. What I would like is this is very exciting to give it more time and sit and discuss it further. What you think, what you feel, and how we think, and how we feel relationship in the future. And also with Donna talking, because she's a teacher as well, we understand. For me, having also that strategy of mediator, what next step, it's protective of the group and you. Because otherwise, I'm not unhappy with you, I'm calling Samad for going to protect them. But if we have respect for relationship and the process, I will be working with you before I go to anybody else. So just for me, I really want to put on the table, when it's able to come back to it or continue tonight, I would like to know you more and learn more what we can do. That's my suggestion.
I really agree with what Abdul says and off of what Ashley said, just about the purpose of the document to begin with, you know, whether we actually have a signed MOU, whatever that means as far as a binding agreement goes in the end, maybe just this discussion has achieved what the MOU is intended to achieve already. I don't know. But also, going back to what Christine said about how it would be helpful for these kind of documents to come organically out of both sides. If we are going to go to next steps or talk about next steps for a resolution to this issue, you know, one thing that I would suggest is the next time we talk about this, there has already been an agreement between the committee who is putting this together and between Dante, and they present that to the HRC collaboratively for approval. And that I would think would be really helpful. And considering the issues that have already been discussed tonight, you know, that I think would be a really good way to resolve this issue and to come to an agreement about a collaborative relationship going forward that we hopefully have already really gotten, you know, begun down the path toward that. So that would be my suggestion for how this body addresses this issue next.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that that has been our intent, and that we ran into some scheduling stuff. We brought a previous draft to Dante a while ago, and our intention was to be able to work together on that and bring that to this meeting. It just wasn't able to happen the way we had hoped. So yeah, I entirely agree that is how it should be done.
And I would appreciate the opportunity. I mean, I don't want to just take this document and just start slicing, and that's not what I want to do, which is what kind of gave me pause about responding to it. Because I'd rather sit down at the table and have a conversation about why I like this and why I don't like this, and why this makes sense and why I'm not sure this makes sense. And then we can work that together. I mean, I'll put an hour and a half aside and we kind of do that. And that works for me.
So I guess my suggestion would be we do that at that committee, same committee level then. The same group that we should keep with it.
I believe, literally, I believe the whole commission, like another time, we're scheduling a really good time for our meeting here is to have this dialogue, and from that assignment to the committee, what are we going to do next? Instead of having a committee, because like Amy and other group, they worked really great on this, they worked really hard on this, and I appreciate that you're thinking about it before giving an answer to come to communicate with us. So my feeling is, instead of spending more time that comes to go to the committee, which is back all the committee, and comes here and trying to slice it as we can, and trying to understand each other again, is come here and discussing it and going from a step-by-step point of view for the next, either we're agreeing or not on how it should look like in here, discussion in here. Because I want to know more from you, what's your mission, vision, steps, your office, us, etc. So if that's possible, I think it's appropriate more for the whole commission here.
I think the difficulty there is that takes up this meeting time. So I think we have to decide as a group how we want to accomplish that. If we as a group decide that that's how we want to spend our meeting time, then we should do so. If not, I would suggest those folks that are interested go to the meeting with Dante.
Yeah, I think that based on what you're saying, I agree with everybody in the process. I think it's exciting to hear from Dante, to hear Abdul saying that this is a commission thing. I do believe that we are on the right path. I also think that we've been at it for a while now, and from my perspective, the worst thing you can do is sometimes to drag things longer than you should, and then it backfires. So I will suggest for the committee to keep working with Dante and the office, and then schedule like a separate time for the commission and also people from the office to get together and have like a third-party comment facilitating questions, to kind of guide the conversation so it's not the commission or the office, and start working more like in a specific way towards understanding. That is like an afterthought or a ripple effect that's coming out of the MOU. So to me, that's kind of like the best of both worlds. But I don't know if that everybody will.
So my only comment, which actually responds to before Myra started, if we do this as this body, then it has to be a public meeting. If we do it as there's this committee meeting with Dante or OEHR, and then some, I don't know exactly how many, but some number of us show up at that, then that also is supposed to be a public meeting, is my understanding. So we do have some functional limitations that if we're going to do it that way, that make it less efficient in terms of time, which is why we created the committee, or the committee was created, and sort of there can be more easy scheduling, more easy of working through this level of detail will be as a commission deal with.
I agree, and I think that if we send it back to the committee, and anybody who is interested, Abdul, if you wanted to be part of that discussion, you could go to that meeting, to sit down with Dante, and then those of us who aren't able to go can get a draft after it's been agreed on, a draft, and an opportunity to review the draft and make comments about the draft if that doesn't reflect the understanding that they have, so that you're not only given the opportunity to go to the meeting itself and participate in that conversation, but also respond to the draft before it's presented to us as a final collaboratively from both sides. I think that would accomplish it and still appreciate the time constraints and just the commission structure that we're looking for. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think that in many regards that was what we hoped for today if we hadn't had the scheduling challenges, that the issues that needed to be revealed that would be helpful for this kind of the discussion that Abdul, you're you're calling for, we would have had listed out and available for topic conversation. So that still can happen, I think.
So, a meeting back Wednesday, and then...
Again, I'm hearing mostly that it should be done through the committee, and again, that isn't the end-all, be-all. I understand your point. We need to have a conversation that involves this entire group and with Dante as a group overall. It doesn't preclude that conversation. That just like Gash has said, that this agreement is one part of it. It's kind of the jumping off point for continuing to develop that relationship. So my suggestion would be that we start that process at that committee level and then plan to have that conversation as part of the process. That would be my suggestion. And move forward that way.
What's done?
That's fine with me. Whichever you find the most efficient for how you want to receive a final document. I think it would be time efficient if we did this in a smaller session and then brought it back. You brought it back and the final recommendation or whatever. But
Yeah, I think that's part of what it would be, like, I'd really just like to see more of a team effort between you and the committee as just for one body, so that both people both feel that this document that serves both entities.
Dante, what about this document are absolutely no-goes for you?
Well, I think we can leave that.
Committee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Leave that
can we,
committee.
can we?
I didn't ask anybody on the commission, I asked Dante a question.
Well, he said,
Well, the reason I ask it, this commission worked over months over these drafts.
Right.
And the material on it is pretty much, at least I thought it was pretty much what we all agreed were core parts of this document. And there are parts that really, are not, that you don't think would be appropriate for you to sign off on. Well, then I think it'd be good for us to know.
I don't know how well I can answer that
Well,
specifically. But in terms of, I guess it's the level of detail. I mean, I don't know that, for organizational purpose, but I don't know that the depth of all that needs to be in this document. I don't know that, authority and autonomy.
So it does sound like that's a different conversation.
Yeah, I think
and one that is best answered with that group and
I think probably the best way for everybody to feel comfortable is if everybody has input and
everybody's had it. This is the third draft of this document. I think it does reflect quite extensively the thinking of this group. So I don't know that it's the words or what's in here. I think there's a fundamental difference that we continue to need to work out.
I think that's something that should happen in that meeting, is talking about basic values. He says collaboration, sharing, communication, and then also looking at differences. Would that be a part of the MOU? Because I know that it was a part of having us move forward. We can't move forward unless we know how we're different.
We're not different in terms of what you just described. We're different in terms of how it's detailed.
okay, so that sounds like something that needs to happen between you and the committee.
Yeah.
I just brought up the piece about mediation. Should there be some disagreement at some point, how we would proceed with how to reach an agreement. That was all. And not even specifically, we're going to call in a mediator, da-da-da-da. Just that we agree that if we disagree, we're going to sit down and work it out.
Yeah. Works for me.
I'm going to encourage that we set a plan at this time.
So the plan right now is for that small committee and anyone else who's interested in beginning that conversation to set up a meeting with Dante. So that committee right now is Amy, Ashley, Myra, and myself. And anybody who wants to come to that meeting, let's broadcast when the date, or it would be hard to schedule everybody. So if you definitely want to be in that meeting, then please contact me. And I'm not going to set a timeline for it. Do we think we need to have a timeline for it?
I think you will be ready for the next 2 weeks. So.
Are you available the next 2 weeks?
Somewhere.
We'll send a group, and then we'll
Let's not try to set the meeting right now, but if there's a sense of immediacy around it, then we will bring, then I'm sensing that we want to have this back on the agenda in October. Is that what I'm hearing?
If there's a final draft.
Okay, there's a final draft. If not, then I don't think we should come back here until there's a final draft, and then we should try to get a conversation on also in those agendas.
If I may make the comment here, the team or the group who works on this, he went far and beyond and being very patient with us to hear us, bring it many times forward and discuss it. I really want to acknowledge that. Second thing I want to know, this group is not about going and changing the whole thing when I'm making my comments. What I want is the group already knows from before what we wanted and what our inputs. And Dante, this is our input actually from the whole group. So this team is just taking forward when we met last time about this. What I am, when I also discussing this, what I'm really looking for is what really Dante is point of view, what you want, and how can we make things align. I don't want to go with the hope that we're changing the whole thing and we're going to flex it this way, or what Taylor mentioned. Those values can stay. So how can we make it work with you and hearing you? That's what's important for me is you, what your point of view, perspective with us. That's what it is. I don't want to hear the team to feel like you need to go change anything. No.
And I know I've tried to offer that at some point before in these meetings, and certainly meeting with the executive committee, I think I've offered it. I'm happy to tell you as many times as you like how I hope to see this commission really flourish and function and be a very viable and important part of this city. That's my mission. That's my vision. That's my hope. And I've said before, if you see me doing something that's a violation of human rights, I expect to see a newspaper article with my name in it. So I'm not trying to inhibit how you do what you do.
No, maybe your office that if they saw you doing violating human rights, you'll see me knocking your door.
Good. And I have defended what this commission has done and is doing when I get a phone call, not from my commissioner, but from other commissioners, asking me questions. And I've said, I've been very clear. I'm not telling the HRC what issues they should take up. Not my job. Not my job.
So the other thing I like about where we could head with this is I think the things that Dante is saying are, my experience is that that's the way we're practicing our relationship now. I mean, Dante has been here for 4.5 months, and we're practicing that relationship the way that Dante is talking about it. So I'd like to see a document that does reflect that. And that's where I think it would be nice if we could head with this.
And I'll put that in writing in a minute.
That's right.
It's not my job to tell you what issues you take up.
That's right. That has been my experience with how we've been practicing this, and so it would be nice if we had a document that does reflect that. I'm not sure we're there yet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public, thank you for your patience. Let us move to public comment. Is there anyone signed up for public comment?
I didn't know there was a sign up. I came in.
Then you may not comment.
No.
All right. Well, we actually don't have rules like that. Please come forward and tell us your name and your comments.
Thank you.
We're going to give you about 3 minutes, and we may not respond to what you have to say, but we always want to hear what folks have to say.
Okay, appreciate it. May I come up here?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Take a button.
I will.
Oh, you're going to
Take
over here?
Well, actually, I want to get to know you guys. What happened was, I'm from the vigil at City Hall. Have you guys seen the vigil in front of City Hall?
Yes.
Anybody seen it? Okay. So this is an affiliation of people. A lot of us call ourselves Occupy Portland, or whatever that means. So that means something different to everyone. But I do a channel called Vigil TV, where we interview houseless people, and I, for example, slept out there every other night. Well, I didn't sleep, I kept watch for 5 months. So the vigil is to end the camping ban, because right now, by saying you can't camp, they define it as bedding and open flame and certain things that are necessary for survival. And Nick Fish was quoted in 2009, I believe, as saying that he believed that they should relax some of the rules for houseless people because they have no alternative but to sleep outside. So as long as there's 2,500 people, as the sidewalk management plan is estimating the draft, outside with no alternative, then the reality of asking the police to come in and deal with it by taking blankets from people in the rain, and I kid you not, is endangering those lives. So what happened was 2 days ago we have two meetings a month with the people who work at the vigil. There's been hundreds of people who've done their part in various ways. We had a meeting and someone brought this document where you submitted a draft to Amanda Fritz, a letter saying you believe that the sidewalk management plan was a violation of human rights. What we are doing is we're demonstrating by arguing the sidewalk 14A.50.030 points where they're being broadly applied incorrectly by police, and then when that happens, we have our little space where people can have belongings, or can have bedding, don't freeze, and we take care of each other. And the biggest part of this for me is that we're an integrated community. What happened with Occupy was very interesting. People didn't know who had a home and who didn't. We worked together and we were all activists and we all had our basic needs met. And then when the campus disbanded, a lot of those activists went back into survival mode. When we realized that was happening, we all grabbed each other and said no. And so those of us at the vigil are saying we are together. So this is my community, even though I have shelter and have never been without shelter. And it means a lot because we're learning what the issues really are. And I'm seeing a disconnect with the public, with these bodies, about what is wanted, what is really wanted. So what I wanted to do is give you our email today for just the vigil, and I'm hoping that someone will contact me so that we can start interacting with this body. We're just learning about you right now. Found out 2 days ago that you guys had said something that was at the heart of our mission. So that email, if I may, is opdxvigiltv@gmail. That's my email, but I'm working with several others. Vigil TV is watching me right now. Come to you. And we meet twice a week. And if you'd ever like to come to our meeting, we put them on the OccupyPortlandCalendar.org. OccupyPortlandCalendar.org is where our Monday and Thursday, 5 p.m. at City Hall meetings will be scheduled and continue to maintain if there's a schedule change. So if anybody would ever like to just come down and light a candle. Anyway, is there any question before I...
Would you say your name one more time?
My name is Mary Nichols, Nichols.
I'm sorry, the last part you said about the meetings that says people WhatsApp, when?
Mondays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. But that has changed in the past. We keep OccupyPortlandCalendar.org up to date. But really, if you just come down at any time and see people there demonstrating and light a candle and talk to us, we'd really like to learn about you guys, because I'm just, like I said, I'm just now reading everything I can on the web, and it's very interesting, and I see that this is a lot more than that letter from 2 years ago, that there's been things going on, and we want to know what's going on with the sidewalk management plan, because we know what's going on with it because we are being managed, and there's some really inhumane stuff going on. There's also some really beautiful things, and the reality of what it means is something that I know intimately, and my friends know even more. So we'd really like to be talking with you guys.
There's a process around sidewalk management plan. Are you or your group involved in that?
Nope.
They meet regularly, and I believe that there's a committee that meets, but I'm not certain of that. We were
I've
involved in
read-
it previously.
I've read that. I read that there is Amanda Fritz, Yeah, well, you guys said it was a violation of human rights, so I'd really like to start with you before I go to Amanda first, although I have to say that out of the commissioners, she's been the one that has said some things that resonate best with us. I have to say that the first time I heard about HRC, it was when you guys gave, correct me if I'm wrong, awards to PPP for how Occupy was handled. Is that you?
It wasn't us.
It wasn't you?
No. It was, actually don't know who that was. I want to say it was CRC.
Good.
Which is the Citizen Review Committee.
Okay.
Maybe.
Good to know. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that is a reminder that we previously were involved in work around the sidewalk management plan and may need to reconnect on that. Is there any other folks signed up for public comment, or anyone who would like to? As you know, we have loose rules around that. Did you?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was going to turn on some lights.
Okay. Might mess up Mike, but
Nope.
Mike's got public
I like
comment
light.
for us today?
Yeah, might as well.
Thanks.
Just a note that I looked on the website and didn't notice any of the meeting notes or agenda lately, and just want to put a word out that that might be good to have the agenda and some of the past meeting notes on your website.
Thank you. I noted that also, that we need to get that updated, so we are, we'll have an update on staff here, hopefully later in the week. That can help us.
Do we want to make a suggestion to put on our next maybe meeting agenda for October, conversation around public comment about Tuesday and how they can take next steps towards...
Yeah, and I think that we ought to add, because, as I mentioned, sidewalk management plan was one of the places we were previously, and the commissioner who had been involved in that is no longer with us. We still exist humanly, but no longer in the commission. I don't mean to tell that they no longer exist at all. But yes, that as a liaison position to sidewalk management, we probably need to look into what sidewalk plan is. Yeah, we're right about it. Okay.
Can I throw a comment in about the sidewalk management?
Sure.
I think their next meeting is October 1st. It's the first Monday of the month. No, yes, October, next month. And it's at the Portland Building on the second floor, usually at 3:30. October 1st, 3:30.
That is right.
And it's a public meeting, Mike?
Yeah, open to the public.
So Mary might want that information also. All right, let's move into, okay, so we are still not going to our presentation on Sons of Haiti Lodge.
Yeah, I'm not getting good reception here, but I think I got a quick note that they're not going to be able to make it.
Okay.
I have a question.
We'll keep moving then.
Are we going to talk about that committee at any time today, the Discovery?
Which meeting?
Discovery. Or just be able to discuss anything about it?
The discovery group or task force or effort to kind of focus on the community piece of the HRC.
We're going to talk right now about HRC organization chart and committee structures. So that would be the place to do it. So the draft of the org chart that I handed out at the last meeting is in your packet. Again, the substantive change to it was that from the strategic plan, we collapsed education and engagement and communications infrastructure into communication and engagement committee. That's that committee you see in the middle. To me, my thoughts are that it would hold events and outreach to other groups, discovery, some of those pieces. Of course, we have CPRC, and so we would replace CGU as a committee, and then we also had a desire to develop a public policy committee also. Barring any objections, this is what I would put forth as the organizational chart and that the spots that we need to fill as far as chairs and committee members go. Is there any discussion around that? I suppose we should probably have a motion to adopt this as our organizational meeting.
I just have a question.
Yes.
I wasn't at the last meeting, I'm sorry. We were catching up. I just noticed underneath the three committees, well, underneath Public Policy Committee, you've got Human Trafficking Task Force and Fair Housing Task Force. Is the idea that those task forces are going to be reporting to the Public Policy Committee?
No, it was that structure really, and I apologize for that a little bit, because it does look organizational, but it really is just, it's not structural, it's organizational. It's how do we organize thoughts around the things that we do. So kind of the same way that nominating committee is up with executive committee, it's over there where we have administrative type functions. These are where we would list all of the policy type functions that we're currently working on. So there would be, other than maybe under CPRC, would there be actual reporting responsibility? So we're pretty flat structure as that makes. Okay.
So,
does that fit with everybody's understanding of that?
yeah, I'd like a follow-up question on that. So I hear you say that this is organizational, not reporting. In terms of communication with OEHR and City Council, is there any translation of that you can give based on this structure?
Yeah, actually, in that case, I would say it is structured. That communication, and I want to say by bylaws, happens through the top part of the structure, if that makes sense. So all of the recommendations, reports, everything come up out of the committees to the HRC and then go to council. Does that answer your question?
So public policy chair would be the only person reporting on human trafficking and fair housing. Is that what you're saying?
No, the leaders of the task forces who report directly to the HRC. So we could move those.
But I'm asking about HRC reporting to OEHR and City Council.
Oh.
That's not what you said, but.
Generally speaking, yes. HRC executive committee or leadership would be the ones that would report to the office and to City Council. Again, mostly so that there are clear lines of communication, so that there aren't too many lines that the outside folks need to pay attention to. That would be my opinion. There's certainly, as we talked about, if there's a need for the task force or one of the other subcommittees to work with or communicate with, then that could be set up. But you want to keep the top part of that organization informed about those activities.
I also have a question. So about the discovery piece that, Christine, Amy, and Ellen and myself have been talking about, and that will be kind of in the Communications and Engagement Committee. So will that be seen as a task force? Will that be dispersed, as just part of the Communications Committee? Because, I don't see how it fits without having it like as a very structured box. So I want to know what's your thought.
Well, my thought is that the process from here is we would approve this as our structure. CPRC already has its work plan, its tasks about what it's doing. Each of the other two committees, since they are fairly new, would need to go away, develop work plans, and get an understanding of the work that they're going to do with some direction from this body. So we'd have to get chairs for each of those committees, get volunteers for those committees, and those groups then would develop the work that they want to do. I think that we have a pretty good sense of the work at this level that needs to be done, and bring those into those committees. So my answer to that is yes, I think that communications and engagement would likely do that big discovery piece under the auspices of engagement. That's my opinion.
So that would become this communication.
It would become one function of that committee in my thought. Do other people have comments about that?
I saw discovery as one of the top ones, just because discovery would be also maybe what was it that we wanted to try to make into rapid response, maybe having some type of national agenda or starting to connect with other HRC to do that. And it was just, it just seemed much bigger than sitting underneath the communications and engagement, because discovery is also, it does so much.
So I guess, what's your suggestion then?
back to discovery communications, or change?
So I guess I'm not wed to the words. What I'm talking about is the function. I agree. I think one of the big functions of that committee, whatever we call it, should be that work. So whether we call it discovery or engagement, I think that's the group that's doing that work. These words come from the strategic plan that we just adopted 2 months ago. So that's where those words come from.
Which is like this, well, Discovery does too.
Right.
Yeah.
But those aren't the words we put to any of those committees at that time. So if we as a group want to decide to change one of these committees to discovery, we could.
I think what we're holding on is we are trying to, this is my understanding, I can be wrong, is we are holding to a committee and what's under it, or the group the committee that's what's holding us instead of branching to multiple committees. So for example, with public policy committee, it's going to confuse me if human trafficking is under it. It has to be human trafficking a committee as well, independent. So I think this is what maybe everybody here may be still confused with. If we're talking about that there is a discovery committee, it needs to be standing alone and branching added either communication or other tasks that they are in charge of to do, or they are creating. So that's what I think we are, I guess, some of us.
And my caution would be that if we develop another committee box on here, it means we have another chair, we have another meeting, we have another set of maps. That's my challenge. And so,
it's okay. Yeah, it's never a problem of creating a committee and somebody taking responsibility as chair and creating things. That branches us more instead of trying to just have it like just 4 chairs or 3 chairs. You see what I'm saying? So it's always good to branch and having a chair and some other committee to take a task instead of forcing it in one group, one committee or anything like that.
So I guess my memory of the logic behind structuring it this way was to distinguish between those things that we wanted to consistently work on over time because the issues were never going to go away. You know, we're always going to need communications, we're always going to need relooking public policy, as opposed to those issues where there's a more finite project that's being worked on. So like the trafficking task force, you know, I'm not saying that we're going to solve human trafficking, but we're going to identify our role in it and figure out how do we want to continue to engage going forward at some point. And so I think that was the thing. So rather than having like this endless string of committees, some which may become defunct or go away, that there would be a smaller number of always existing committees, and then underneath those would be these task force or subcommittees or whatever we want to call them that would come up when there was a particular issue that needed to be addressed and then go away or not.
I just wanted to remind us too about the public policy requirements, that how we structure that will influence whether it is a public meeting and whether we follow that protocol. That's a responsibility.
You see my hand?
Good. Done. Just check it out.
I think that the Discovery Committee, as I see it, is where we are investigating issues. And that could be a committee that falls underneath communications and engagement and its own committee.
I see, because in our strategic plan, there's the objective of having discovery, there's the objective of having communications and talking accessibly. Yeah. There's 4 basic things. I think that these major boxes should probably even reflect those, aside from public policy. But I just see it having its own separate head because it'll in itself have different committees inside of that because we all have.
I think you could, as a committee, you can decide to create task forces to do individual things. I mean, it's really flexible. Like, we created the Human Trafficking Task Force out of whole cloth. I mean, we just decided that we wanted one. You know, same with the fair housing. And so, as one of these committees, if you want to branch off into a subcommittee kind of a thing, I think you can do that, or a task force. Or, but I think that, you know, originally you were saying, well, discovery, just the word should be in there because it's important to recognize because of the strategic plan. So maybe we can just add discovery, communications, and engagement. Bless you. Maybe we just add the word discovery, and then maybe we can put it on.
Just add a quick thing. I've gone back and forth about this, whether or not I think discovery needs to be its own committee, and I think it matters less to me how it's set up, but I am concerned about whether or not one committee chair can manage and report, keep track of the whole breadth of what this committee I see is hoping to be in charge of. I actually don't, I'm not confident that one person can hold all that, but I could be wrong.
I completely agree with Amy because I see this as, you know, communication and engagement. And I know these are more examples, right? Like race docs, kindness forums, things like that. But to me, that this is such a big. There's so many task forces, there's so many things that can be done that it's like a full-time job. It can turn into a full-time job. We're all volunteers, so if you have, you know, a group that focuses on connecting with the community, like being the ears, basically. You are the ear, this is what's happening, bring issues forward. And then you have another group that takes care of, you know, the candidate forums, like the more events and things that the HRC puts together, like brings it back. So I see different groups, but I do think that, to me, it can even be divided into two different things, and those in itself are pretty big jobs, even if they're divided into. So that I do agree that it seems like a lot just for one group, for people.
Stephen and Kyle?
I'm very persuaded that discovery actually should be the responsibility of each and every one of us, as opposed to a particular committee. And the way that I've envisioned it is that we are the eyes and ears, so that any one of us, as opposed to funneling it through a committee that's going to have a special responsibility to be looking for issues, like we could have rapid response, which I think is different than discovery, because we've discovered something, now we need to act on it. So that I definitely think we need people mobilized on that. But in terms of discovery, I would be very hesitant to create a discovery committee, because then that sort of lessens it just creates bureaucracy when I really want to focus on action. And so if we discover some issue, I want to be able to bring it right here, right to this table, let's move on. And then we can create a committee if we need to take action on what we've done with the other ones. Kind of
I think that's great, and if a group like that is created, it doesn't mean that that's the only group that can bring stuff to the table. It means that this group will create a work plan saying, we are going to schools and educate our human rights issues. We're going to these communities, there's these events, there's, you know, we're adding in a more consistent, organized, in a way systematic, you know, way of, this is everything we've done. We went to X amount of schools, we talked to so-and-so, we're going to approach, we're going to follow up with the Commission on Disabilities, and then if anybody else knows about an issue, then of course that can be brought up. Maybe this is more like a missing link that, you know, it's just missing.
I actually brought the draft that the 5 of us, put together, if it's appropriate to share, just for more clarity.
Draft of?
The purpose of a discovery, suggested purpose of a discovery committee.
Okay.
Yeah. The Community Discovery Committee's purpose is to design and implement information gathering events and other initiatives to gather insight about the needs and efforts related to human rights in Portland from the community, inform HRC priorities, align and synthesize our work with other initiatives, as well as provide an overall picture of how our work is addressing community needs. This includes networking with other organizations within city and out, convening discovery events, often in collaboration with other organizations while introducing the work of HRC, and coordinating HRC meetings outside of OEHR. Just a starter.
So that word to me is actually the engagement part of that committee.
Yeah, I mean, that,
It's relationships and...
I don't, Alan, I don't want us to argue over the semantics of this.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm asking, or what I'm sitting here trying to figure out is what is the substantive difference between what's being talked about at the Communications and Engagement Committee versus this proposed Discovery Committee? Because everything that you just described, to me, is synonymous with engagement. Now, so are we just talking about how will we name the committee, or are we talking about more than that?
I think we're talking about the breadth.
The breadth.
I think that we're talking about the Discovery being the ears of the community, and then there's a whole other set of sending out word, being on Facebook, working with our
Which is
staff.
communication.
Which is, yes, thank you, the communication.
So
Yeah.
I go back to exactly what Lloyd has said. So again, we're arguing about the function of a committee that doesn't exist yet. So I say go away, if you have an interest in this, go away, define the function of communications and engagement, and that's exactly what you just said.
But
So-
that didn't include communication.
But you just said, so you're saying communications would not be part of that, part of the
So
function?
separate communications and engagement, or discovery.
Rename
Exactly.
engagement to Discovery and separate it from communications.
That's what,
Is
I
that
think
what-
we've been talking about. That's what I've been hearing.
I think we need to go back to my point. Is it doesn't, for me, even my point before, it was taken like I'm trying to create something new, where I'm trying to clarify what everybody's concerns is about having own committees instead of like under other committees. What I heard also, Myra, correct me if I'm wrong, is we cannot have one person taking the lead as a chair or responsibility as a chair and having under that committee 5 tasks that God knows how many duties each one of them doing and what doing, and put the responsibility on one chair instead of having, which I was mentioning in the beginning, independent groups working on that, having their own person in charge, reporting to here, and assignments, whatever needs to be acting like the chair or having the chair. It doesn't matter how many we have of them. It's okay, just when we have entered any one of these areas, making it clear that this is your charge, this is your task, and each group of these have their own committees. It doesn't matter what's in the top, it's just your own committee, and your report, your responsibility, and you're responsible for it. I think that's what I'm still hearing the confusion going on around here, instead of putting everything under one name and telling them you are what that you are, and the chair will be following up, reporting, and doing the work. Am I someone else, or is it what I have been hearing?
Well, I'd like to recommend that we, at this point, we haven't even moved this document, but and yet we keep discussing it as if we had already moved on it. I would invite us to think in terms of motion that would capture the conversation in a way that we can vote it up or down. Otherwise, all I'm going to hear is everyone's opinion about some particular concept. And that, frankly, is not helpful for an all-commission conversation. So I would suggest that we do that.
Here, Steve.
Thank you. It sounds to me like there's a lot of energy around this idea, and which means if there's energy around it, it means there's going to be action around it, which I think is very, very exciting. I'm very supportive of us taking action. So if there's a group of people on this commission who want to get together and do something like that, I think it's fabulous, and that we should facilitate making that happen. And I think we all agree on that. And so, if we want to take a motion, sort of like what's the structure we're talking about, just kind of move forward, I think that's the best way to do it.
I agree, and I just want to add just my 2 cents about something, is that as a commission, we're supposed to be getting input from the community. And what we do with that, I'm going to go back to OEHR or go back to the city and advocate for it. But I'm also wondering, would we do any kind of lobbying? Would we do any kind of, as a commission?
It would depend on what the issue is.
And where would that fit? Because, there's so many issues. That's why I passed around a strategy chart. And you can all think of the issues and say root causes and add our frame to it, goals and whatnot, but then what we do with that, you know, what are our tactics?
I was just going to say, if we're going to vote something up or down, what we could do is just excise communications, put it over, and just make it discovery engagement. And
Yeah, I mean, I hear that.
It sounds like that's where the energy is.
I hear that's where it's headed, and I guess the issue I have is communication to me is an equally important function that we need to contain somewhere. Could that be engagement? And so I don't want to lose track.
Well, I'm saying just create a separate box for the communications. So it's,
So we get,
you know, instead of just, I mean, it sounds like there are enough volunteers out here that want to do both. And if there are enough volunteers.
I haven't actually heard volunteers for communication.
Yeah,
That's what I'm interested in. That's what I'm interested in hearing. So that's actually why those two things are wrapped together, because we need to pay attention to both those pieces and not just select one or the other. That's why they're wrapped together.
So to me, the communications scene, because it's so important, it needs to be done by somebody that's in a way a daily duty. You know, they're there on the computer, they can put up a press release, they can do the fit. So to me, that's something the staff person can support the HSC pretty easily in coordination with this committee. But I don't see, you know, sort of like any of us 24 hours in the computer like that.
Right.
We can't.
No, that's not
so
the intent. This committee meaning the communications committee or the?
the what?
I don't know which is the communication.
The committee we've been talking about the engagement.
This
and
committee that you're talking about now.
That we're talking about, we're presenting. So that to me is a way that we can get what we want.
So I would agree with Hector. I would entertain a motion now for us to draw on this piece of paper the committees that we think would function well, that differs from what you see in front of you.
Wait, what's your motion?
I'm not making the motion. I'm asking for a motion.
So for us to draw out.
Or you don't draw it, you can just say it. How should
I support this as long as the communications, there's an understanding that the communications piece is going to be carried mostly by the staff.
Would that also mean cards? Because I planned on making cards.
You're talking function now.
Yeah.
so
Okay,
we're
sorry.
talking structure.
Yeah.
I move, Mr. Chair, that we approve this draft. That's my motion.
Second.
Thank you.
Discussion.
Well, no, now the discussion takes place. Now you can amend it or change it or do what you wish.
Hector, we've not been following Robert's rules.
No, I don't.
He's trying to direct our conversation.
And I'm not Robert's Rules of Order, but if we don't, we're not going to have the time to do it.
I agree with you, and so that's the, and so does
Can
that?
I make an amendment to the motion?
Yes.
I believe the amendment that Myra just asked for, which is a smart one, is that the understanding is that as long as we've got this communications and engagement committee, and I think if we're not talking semantics, when we say engagement, we're talking about discovery and engagement. It's the same thing, okay? Right? So the amendment is, on Myra's suggestion, that the understanding is if we approve this draft, that the communications, our understanding of that communications function is going to be something that our staff person is going to be spearheading for us. When we need Facebook updates and we need press releases, website updates, and I believe, based on our conversations with Dante and all of our, and based on our understanding of what staff is going to do, is that a staff person will be able to coordinate, to manage social media and things like that. So that my amendment would be approve this with the understanding going forward that the communications aspect of the communications and engagement committee will be supported by the staff.
Oh, without question.
The friendly amendment.
Friendly amendment.
Is there a suggestion on how we should reflect that in this document, or does it need to be?
Yeah, I think that we could. I think that if this was a discovery committee, I think within engagement, within discovery, the definition is engagement, is to engage. So really, it could just be a discovery committee. Communications is by staff.
How about if you put communications up? Put the staff person underneath the executive committee and communications underneath the staff person.
I think that's suggesting a philosophical shift, though, in our involvement in communication.
That's exactly right.
Can we just
The
put
our
a...
role in communications is exactly what we said, right? We have to provide direction, so we're not going to ask the staff person to come up with Facebook posts. We're going to come up with Facebook posts and ask the staff person to do that. Is that your understanding of how that function would work?
To me, that's something that will work in the work, would be in the work plan of this committee, very
Yes.
clearly stated, you know.
Yep.
Yes.
This is what everybody's going to
So
do.
That's why I would leave communications with that committee.
Because the staff person, we need to have a liaison between HRC and the staff person.
For
And that's what
communications, and that's what
communications person
that's what that person is. So, because it's differentiated from the chair doing that role as well. So,
Do we see communications as being, hitting every one of these things, though? I mean, we've got, so it seems, I guess, a little misplaced to me to put it. It would be like Public Policy Committee and communications, or Community and Police Relations Committee and communications, Discovery Committee and communications. You know, like, shouldn't we put it as a separate box that kind of supports all of the different committees?
to me, it also holds the general marketing. That's the other
Right.
concept that's there. Is there's a general overall HRC communication
Right.
that holds.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's the same with Discovery. Every other committee and every other function holds a Discovery function. But the main, so what they're talking about is the main sense of Discovery for the Commission overall, which is the same for communication. Does that make sense?
And I don't think we can trust each individual committee, we can trust them, but that they're going to come up with they're each going to come up with a cohesive communications plan, whereas a communications committee can do that, bring it to the HRC and say, look, this year we want, to push Facebook, we want to create a Twitter account. I mean, they're more, 30,000 foot level communications, not like, hey, the Housing Rights Task Force has a press release that needs to go out. What's it going to look like? How are we going to do it? That doesn't go to the Communications Committee. But the Communications Committee may have already decided, here's how we're going to handle press releases. And so all the other committees know, like, okay, when there's a press release, run it by the chair, then send it to the staff person, they'll post it, whatever.
Right. And so are you agreeing with me? I can't tell.
I'm saying if we eliminate communications as a separate function, then we don't have people whose purpose is to discuss our overall communication
Right.
strategy.
And I think we need that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I think we should draw it out, put it as a separate box that supports that supports the CPRC, that supports the Engagement Discovery Committee, that supports the Public Policy Committee, that 30,000 foot view doesn't micromanage, but gives some structure to how we can communicate with the public and support the different activities of those committees.
So I'd like to make an attempt at another friendly amendment to that we add a fourth committee that's called Discovery and/or Engagement. Communication stands alone as a committee. With Myra's suggestion, and thank you to Kyle, that we work closely with the staff member to receive support on that. Period.
I second.
I think it is a new motion. Because we're not adopting it as written.
That's right.
That's
So should we vote on whether to adopt this as written? Was that the first
We
motion?
need to vote on the first motion first, so we're going to vote it down.
Well, unless Hector accepts it as a friendly amendment.
Oh, the seconder hasn't.
Or withdraws his motion.
Now, hold on. My motion is for the overall structure, which I understood was an open structure. This is not locked in, but this is a framework which will allow us to initiate our strategic plan, but it would still be open to all sorts of other creative venture. So what you're not talking about is not necessarily a new structural plan, but a component within it. And that is an amendment issue, not a motion issue. Because if you want a new motion, then you have to have in mind a new structure, a new draft of the structure.
I like your high-level thinking, Hector. So,
Mr. Chairman, if you could articulate, maybe for everybody, are we doing a makeover of Don Hector's motion, or is there a new motion?
there's one friendly amendment that's been accepted, that Kyle put forth, and then Amy has one that we're trying to add to.
So could you articulate what the...
Hector's original motion is to accept this general structure that supports the work of the HRC. Kyle's amendment is that if we use the word communications, that the understanding is that it will be mostly support, the functionality of it will be supported by staff. Amy's amendment is that we change the title in two of the boxes in this structure, one to be communications, the other to be discovery and engagement.
Can you really throw the whole thing salt? Literally, from my world, when I got this, I really don't care about this part below. I care about this part here as a political, as a something that structures us. In this part here, we can add a box of a new organization we started. We can make a booklet of what each one of them means, who's in charge of and communication, what support staff does for everybody. What's important for me is I'm voting on, I like me to be here in this commission, responsible to the community, and who to report to. And the bottom one is free, as we discussed it in the committee, we can add, subtract, whatever. So that's what I was, when I got this, I was like, oh, okay, I like this part. Here is all of us, we can do it or add or subtract.
And that's what I hear Hector's motion to be. And the two amendments to define other two pieces that we have now added on. So Amy, your amendment looks like that, right?
I can't read that, but I believe you, yeah.
This one says discovery and engagement, this one says communications.
Yes.
So we added it.
Switch them because race talks, candidates forum, and...
That's right.
Yeah. Oh,
So where did those go?
It was just a lesser race.
Under
Yeah, just
discovery
And engagement?
Yeah.
Just one little question. So who's interested in being in communications?
Well, we have...
Can we
need...
No, because if you, to me that's an important thing to consider, because if we vote or whatever to make it, then somebody needs to be in that group. If there's no people that are interested in leading it, then why are we even having it? Then the staff person can be very easily coordinated with the staff person. That's why I want to.
I guess I would leave it more flexible, leave the box there, and if there's somebody who's interested, we'll put them in that box. If not, then we would do just what you're saying.
Remember,
just have the staff do it.
being the person in that box is not the one who's going to do the actual stuff.
That's right.
It's going to come up with a strategy of how we're going to communicate with the public. It's not about who's going to draft the Facebook post. It says Facebook posting is something we want to do. And then it's up to all of the rest of us to come up with material to put on Facebook.
Fair enough. Both on this and these functions can be...
Oh, we have two functions defined, I think, right?
Can we vote before we do the amendments that have been made? Do we have the proper order?
Second? Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to call the question. So all in favor of accepting this structure to support the function of the HRC, with the understanding that the staff person will provide significant assistance in the communications function, and that we have relabeled two of the boxes, that the four boxes now say discovery and engagement, CPRC, communications, and public policy committee. And the other boxes below that to be rearranged. With an aye and a show of hands, those in favor.
Aye.
With a nay and a show of hands, those opposed. And by saying abstention and a show of hands, anybody who abstains. Thank you. Now, let's do one piece of business related to that. Are there folks who are interested in volunteering for and or leading any of those boxes, save for the ones that are already occupied in CPRC? So I'm talking about discovery and engagement, communications, or public policy committee. Let's start with discovery and engagement. So Myra is interested in, and Christine, and somebody has to write this down, because I'm not, and Diallo. Or the folks that are engaged, so.
This is a communication.
No, this is discovery and engagement. So our bylaws actually right now say that the committees will elect the chair of their committee. So we can do that. Is there folks who are interested in communications at this point?
I'm in the group, but no, not in the request to be leadership.
Oh, no, this is just go in the group and get schedule a meeting.
You guys make your own chair.
You don't want to be in the group?
How about communications? So I'm going to move to communications. Anybody interested at this point in communications, or is that something that we need to continue to talk about? Christine is interested? Emily may be interested?
Yeah, Emily, I think will be.
Emily will be interested?
We're putting Emily in. She's in Turkey. Waves her right up there.
So at least a couple folks right now. Okay. So again, each of those committees will be asked to define their own work plan and elect their chairs. We can have some conversations like that. And how about public policy committee? Are there folks who are interested? So Ashley, we believe that Damon likely will be. Oh, I forgot to announce to folks that Damon is not here because he is a delegate to the Democratic National Convention that is in Charlottesville right now. So our very own Damon.
I mean, he can no longer serve on this commission. This is a nonpartisan commission.
He can leave his partisan at the door.
That's why he's not here
He
tonight.
was correct.
Thank you. So Ashley and we believe Damon. Okay. And so each of those groups will give you some forum to how we want to develop work plans and move things forward and how things will work. And we will also discuss with you individually about public meeting laws.
And everybody who is a chair of a committee is required to attend executive committee meetings. So, just so you know, before you become chair of the committee.
That's another piece we could change.
Yeah, we could.
So, all right.
Can you give me the date of the standing dates of the executive committee meeting?
Third Mondays.
Okay.
Yep, we have to change it to September, I think, for Rosh Hashanah.
Yes, we do.
Alan, I have one quick thing for structure
Yes.
before we move. I'm very interested in brainstorming and want to invite others, particularly Abdul and Dante, if you are willing, on a design for a rapid response structure group model. And I'm happy to take any feedback about that right now, as Alan will allow us. And I want to make that happen pretty soon. So please let me know.
My suggestion is we would do it offline.
Okay.
I have a comment. The cards, I need input, but rapid response will need cards, and I plan on making them. I'm not planning on being a part of the rapid response, but any input on what they need to have on them. I was planning on just making individual ones for each commissioner. I don't know who's going to be on the commission in the next coming up months, and then I will need to make cards for them. And what kind of picture do you want? Just thinking that picture that was going to go on the Facebook.
I guess I would work with the communications folks on that, and I also suggest that I actually have a template for a previous card that we've used, and the office also has one already. We could decide as a group should decide how that should go. I don't think you should decide here. We don't decide here. But yeah. There you go. All right. I want to move on to item number 7, as we are about at least 15 minutes behind. Communication and engagement updates. Since Emily is not here, nor is Damon, I will update you on all these items. So we have 2 events coming up in September that we're involved in. The first one we are involved in only as a sponsor, and really just to add our name to it, on September 12th. And I just feel like that date is not right. It is. It is right. September 12th, Dr. Joseph Graves is coming here on behalf of the Portland State Department of Criminal Justice. That's not the right name. But he's also agreed to give a public presentation about the race and the criminal justice system. Wow, I want to say so. Criminal justice system. And so that presentation, we are partnering with Portland State University. And is that the UNA one also? To present him that evening at 6 p.m. or so. It's in the evening on the 12th.
It's 6 to 8 p.m.
At PCC.
Moriarty.
So if you don't know who Dr. Graves is, he was a consultant on the Race, Power, and Illusion series. So that's September 12th. September 19th is our City Candidates Forum.
September 19th, you moved the date? September. Wasn't it the 24th?
Yes.
Maybe
it
just
was.
at one time.
Oh, you changed it to the 19th?
Well, the
Wow.
mayoral candidate.
Well, it was changed.
It was changed.
Yes. So it is the 19th.
At what time?
7:30.
7:30 at Southeast.
Community Music Center.
Yeah, it's in Southeast Portland.
There are signs around
Out
here.
here. And also, you should receive by email a copy of the flyer, so please forward that to your networks, to folks, and let them know that if they have an interest in the development of our fair city, that this is a good opportunity to come and ask those folks who might be in charge of that questions. Actually, I don't know the format.
Well, the moderator is the professor from Pacific University.
The moderator is Professor Jim Moore, who is a well-known political analyst in the area. And I believe that the committees are going to generate some questions.
The two sponsors will also.
And the two sponsors. This is the one that's being sponsored by UNA and Portland Commission on Disability. Portland Commission on Disability actually had a mayor candidate forum and has another city council candidate forum also coming up.
Yeah, it's in three parts. Candidates speak on their thoughts on human rights in the area, and then Commissioner Leeds will give questions, and then it's open to the public for questions.
It's open to the public for questions. Okay. And then we are starting work on the Human Rights Award luncheon that it's set for December 10th at the Northwest Natural Building in Northwest Portland. And Emily and I are the only people on that committee so far. We invite others to come join us.
I didn't respond to the email in time for the doodle, but...
Well, we talked on the phone, and so here's what we've talked about so far, just conceptually. We've talked about the award being 3 different awards, a legacy-type lifetime achievement award, an emerging leader award, and a organization award. We also are going to ask, likely we're going to put out a call for nominations, and then convene a group of folks from here and possibly outside to go through the nominations and work to select those 3 individuals or groups. There will be a luncheon. Likely we'll charge for the luncheon, so that has some stature to it. And I think there are other things that I'm forgetting to tell you that I may have spoken of. So there will be some efforts coming up. Oh, the other one is, the thing we talked about too conceptually that was sort of easy for us to put our hands around in how we evaluate the recipients is to use our mission statement. So in those 3 categories, to find individuals and groups who have worked to support ending discrimination, fostering greater inclusion, and bringing groups together in the city. So that would seem like an easy way to, an easy criteria to use to evaluate those folks. So we definitely need some more folks eventually to help with nominations, logistics, and other things. That's coming up in December. All right. Let's move on then, unless there are questions about those events. We have a couple of big pieces left still, so I'm going to get through these. So let's do the housing rights task force piece next. Lloyd?
Okay. So I'll try and make this quick, but I have two separate motions that I'm bringing on behalf of the task force. But I want to give you some background so you're not like, we don't know anything and why are you asking us to vote on something. So the task force has met 3 or 4 times already. We've done some outreach to key stakeholders on the issues of Section 8 discrimination and inclusionary zoning, removing the ban on inclusionary zoning. We're coming today with the motions because there is a sense of urgency at the state legislative level that mid-September is a date by when current legislators can basically submit bills that will definitely be on the agenda come January. And these are 2 issues that we believe are very important to make sure are on the agenda and not leave it up to the hopes that sometime between now and January somebody comes forward and says, yes, this is important, we want to do it. So what we've learned so far is that no one that we have been able to identify is definitely going to ask the legislator to bring up legislation that would end Section 8 discrimination. We do believe that it's possible some other entity may bring up legislation to end the ban on inclusionary zoning. But our feeling is that we really want to make sure that this happens. And so the first motion that we're coming to you with is to authorize the task force to continue working on the issues of ending Section 8 discrimination and ending the ban on inclusionary zoning in Oregon because it would predominantly benefit the city of Portland to pursue all viable options, which could include submitting in the name of the HRC a legislative concept to 1 or more legislators for them to include in their package that gets what they call pre-session file. Does that make sense?
Is that your motion?
That is my motion.
Committee, so it doesn't require a second.
Look at that.
Discussion?
Yes.
This may be a remedial question. Could you just tell me again what inclusionary zoning is?
Inclusionary zoning is a tool that cities in other areas of the country can use to promote integration by requiring a developer to make sure that some set of apartments or some set of houses be priced at affordable levels to make sure that there are low-income people who will live in that new neighborhood. There's a ban on that in the state of Oregon. And what it does is when a developer comes and says, I want to build 300 McMansions, the cities and counties have very limited resources to require them to make sure that area is integrated by using affordable housing as a tool. So eliminating the ban would allow cities to adopt inclusionary zoning policies that would say, okay, fine, but 20% of these have to be priced at X amount so that low-income people will be able to live here.
What was the purpose behind the ban?
So the ban went into effect in 1999. It was voted in 1999. And I think it was just, I don't know a lot of the history behind it, but the developers simply, I think they saw what happened in Montgomery County, Maryland, and became concerned that Oregon might try that, or some city in Oregon might try that. Because Montgomery County, Maryland was the first county that really had this as a requirement, not just as a, gosh, it would be nice and we can give you a couple tax breaks or whatever if you do it this way. They said, no, you have to set aside so much.
So if we authorize you to, take whatever necessary steps to end Section 8 discrimination, which sounds really good. I'm just wondering exactly what it is that we're authorizing you to do on behalf of the HRC. You know, I mean, is there a mechanism by which we could approve a letter? I mean, it makes me a little nervous to just say, go ahead and send something out on our letterhead if we don't get to see it.
Well, I'm happy to to circulate what we have, what we've been working on as a task force before it goes out. The reason why I'm asking for this at this time again is solely due to the timing. We've been told that there's a mid-September deadline for legislators, which means that for the public there's an earlier deadline. And so we're expecting that anything that comes in to a legislature from outside their from outside their office needs to be to them by Monday. But basically what we're submitting is what's called a legislative concept, which is basically a form that says what is the problem, what's the proposed solution, and what laws are we talking about here. And so we've got one drafted that just says, the problem is that segregation is all over Oregon and is a problem and violates human and civil rights, and that ending the ban on sexual discrimination is the proposed solution. And it's pretty but I'm happy to send that around the whole commission.
I don't think we can authorize the task force to have sort of carte blanche, because that's one of the pieces that would trigger the public meetings laws. A subcommittee that has that kind of authority to speak on behalf or to act on behalf of the commission becomes a public body. So I don't think that that's necessarily what the ask is. I think, again, I think the ask is more around us, the task force, being able to submit this legislative concept if we come to the understanding that nobody else is going to, as a solution to what we believe will help end discrimination around housing. The problem is that we don't know that definitively at this moment, so we need some latitude to be able to not submit it if something does come up over the next several days. We're trying to schedule meetings and have met with some of the players.
That was my question. I had heard that it is a possibility for this to be legislative agenda. I wondered if that was...
That's going to be the second motion. I guess we should explain that. So we are also going to be working with the city in parallel to try to get on the city legislative agenda.
Right. And that was one of the meetings we had to learn about that process. That process won't be finalized. The city's legislative agenda won't be finalized until January, which it means that whatever bills they want to push won't be pre-session filed, which because it's them, that may not be an important issue. But we won't know until then. The other thing we learned is that their agenda is determined by consensus. So all 5 commissioners and city councilors, whatever, would have to agree on it. And then but we know that so far Portland Housing Bureau has not put this forward, and no bureau or office has officially put it forward as an issue, but we did hear that the Office of Equity was considering it, or was looking into it. And so the second motion, which I'll make later, but is that we also work with OEHR to see as much as possible that this is included in the city's legislative agenda.
But we don't want to lose the opportunity to be able to submit it on our own if needed. And again, timing is the biggest issue.
So I'm still a little unclear about exactly what we're authorizing. Is it a document that's going to be presented on behalf of the HRC in support of certain policies? And are those policies going to be laid out in that document?
Yes. I would say yes to all that. It's called a legislative concept. So it says, basically it's a member of the public that goes to the legislator and says, here's I think the problem, here's how I think you solve it. You know, if you would be so kind as to move a bill through the state legislator, okay, sure, then that's how the process starts. So there's no guarantee that it does. It's just a suggestion to a state representative or senator that says, here's how you solve this.
But it's relatively general where you're saying, this is Section 8 discrimination, we want it to stop.
No, it's very specific. It actually would change an ORS that said, so it would be specifically around creating or adding Section 8 voucher holders as protected class under a source of income. So you could no longer discriminate against Section 8 voucher holders under that system.
So I support this idea. I think this is sort of why I'm on the HRC. This sort of good stuff that we can do. And I would like to support the idea. And as I understand this motion is the task force is going to draft a legislative conflict. And that if this is also part of the motion, if it's not perhaps one of the good part of the motion, that the draft form comes to the full HRC, for the HRC to review, and perhaps we need to have a special session, a special meeting called in time to be able to do this. And I'm fully willing to do that because I think this is really good stuff that would then allow us to sign off on it, have discussion about it, and sign off on it.
The problem is timing is the biggest piece. And so, because it has to go pretty quickly in the next week or so.
That's what the state says here, not the city.
Right.
But for the city too.
No, the city's
So-
a lot of time.
Yeah. So, Stephen, are you talking about the second part for the city?
I was talking about
us,
the state.
okay, but
I'm talking about the first one of the state, the legislative concept. If it's written at a very broad level, then I think the HRC really ought to be part of it. If we're submitting something legislative, like something like that, I think we need to have review at the commission level to sign off.
I just have a question about the process. After the concept is introduced, to what extent will the HRC, the committee specifically, spend time and energy walking it through if the legislator does bite?
So our goal, our goal is to spend the next, from now till January at least, continue to learn more about all the players involved in building the coalition that would be necessary to try and achieve a positive result of the legislature. So the goal here isn't to submit this and then walk away. This is just, we feel it's important given, I mean, to be frank, the conversations I've heard amongst housing advocates has been, we think this is a great idea, we're not pushing it. And we also believe that given the Locked Out series that got us all talking about this is a moment when we actually there may be public will to have this happen, and we would hate to see, the analogy I use is playing doubles tennis, and the ball comes across, and each partner looks at each other and says, oh, I thought you had it. And right now, that's what it's seeming to us as everybody else is looking at, everyone's looking at everyone else saying, well, we thought you were going to do that.
So it's not being pushed because of capacity, organizational capacity?
I think it's not being pushed because of politics. Because it could actually happen, and I think that those who normally would vociferously be pushing it are concerned that there may be a backlash.
I really support, I love that this has come forward here. It's really exciting to me. I second what was said about this is the good stuff we should be a part of more. So I'm in full support of what you're proposing. I know I'm not making a motion, but I'm in full support of that. I just would encourage, and it sounds like the thoughts are already been there, to follow it through beyond concept introduction, just because on the national level, when we've been involved in that, sometimes it can go in a direction that's very detrimental as opposed to helpful. But if we're still there, then that's excellent.
And if it were up to us, we would be structuring this differently. We would be building a coalition leading up to introducing the bill. But like I said, we don't want to miss an opportunity. We want to give this as great a chance as possible. And pre-session file, getting it as part of the pre-session file bills doesn't guarantee that, but it eliminates one procedural hurdle that may come up later.
Would it work, Stephen, if we voted tonight and distributed it and asked for comments back before, say, Monday? because we have to work and rely something on David when he returns. So,
I'm fine with that if that complies with all of our requirements. It's not discussion line. That's a great, it's more efficient way.
well, if I think we could do it that way if the vote was clear tonight that the task force is approved to act and to take that step.
What does our response policy say?
I don't think it says anything about this in particular. I think
We don't
most-
have one.
Right.
We
Yeah,
discussed that earlier.
and so, but, yeah, and that's what necessitates this process to some degree. But yeah, that would be my suggestion, is that we give folks the opportunity to see it with the understanding that the task force will be sending it out on Monday.
I'd be comfortable with that too. I mean, I like to have the information because sometimes I'm asked about certain things that we do and I don't know the background, so I have to get back to you like later. So just to have the information would be very helpful. If there really be a huge problem, I think that can be addressed through a chair, and the chair should have the ability to say, hey, we got to do something else. But
I don't know the answer to this question, but is there a mechanism that, like in an emergency situation, the executive committee can be consulted about this? Like, can this body authorize the executive committee to approve a draft so that at least we have the opportunity for 4 of us to get together? And if there's a problem, we can send it out to everybody, and then everybody can tell us if people have objections to it, can tell us, and then we can come together as an executive committee and say this isn't going to work. I mean, it's just, I'm not very comfortable with this, as you can probably tell.
Let me say, who's in task force?
Diallo, Alan, me, and Myra.
So,
Damon.
okay.
And Damon.
Here's another question. You know who we are. You know what's Human Rights Commission. You know what we're doing. You know the politics. I trust you. So here it is, more number of commissioners. So for me, it just becomes approved, just becomes any language that, like Hector said, for my record, so because by tomorrow maybe I will be going advocacy or sharing what we are doing as human rights. But this part, as Ashley mentioned, very, very crucial under us. And Malloy, I know, you know very well, you know the history. So I'm not worried, and we should not be worried, because we have a representation here. Otherwise, I will be questioning every decision of every committee we have here to bring forward to this Human Rights Commission any decision, any point of view, because that's how we need the process to go. So what I'm trying to say, when we put a committee, we have not one person in it. We don't have somebody being a politician or lobbyist. We take our clothes off and leave them out there, but we are all commissioners. Let's start to trust each other and move forward with decisions. That's it. If you need to put the letter, submit it to us before Monday, please, just to indicate that, and let's move forward.
I will speak to my mind.
Call for the question.
I don't think it's about trust.
Call for the question. Go ahead.
I'm just speaking my mind.
Okay, call for the question on Malloy's motion to have the Housing Rights Task Force submit legislative agenda concept.
If necessary.
If necessary.
The legislative concept, changing state law to end Section 8 discrimination.
And are we adding send it out to folks?
I mean,
Would folks like to see it?
Yes,
Like
sure.
that?
Sure.
Okay. All right, all in favor of that motion that I just said by a...
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat the motion, just to make sure that, because I do want to just make sure that so that's included, that we are going to get this information
Yes.
ahead of time.
Submit, okay, we're authorizing the Housing Rights Task Force to submit the legislative concept if necessary. That piece is to be determined by the work of the task force over the next 5 days, essentially.
And after review of the legislative concept by the HRC.
And after review of the legislative concept by HRC.
I'm going to object to that language because we're not reviewing it before we're voting on this. So maybe, I mean, this is the approval of the legislative concept is not subject to HRC review in any way, according to this vote. I just need that to be clear. I don't want to vote against this. But
Well, your amendment could be that that can be sent forward pending any objections from commissioners.
And if commissioners object, then what?
If this is the thing, there is the reality of everybody needs to come and say vote no to object it, or are we voting the idea of the discrimination is a great idea, of course, under human rights, just the language of the letter? That's what I'm hearing. Otherwise, we are going to submit nothing in the future that deals with anything that is discrimination. We have a deadline. So for me, either have an executive committee to vote on it, or have one human rights commission to vote on it. We need just to put something on the table, trust the task force we have, or a committee, and move forward. Language of the letter. If we disagree with the letter, then we turn the letter down or modify it. That's what I mean. But the idea is to put this forward, need to go forward. If anyone who can see that way will vote, meaning yes, or whose vote or 17.
And another suggestion is those who would object would be agreeable to work with Malloy on changes that would make them comfortable.
Point of order,
Yeah, I
Mr.
think-
Chairperson.
Yeah, I think
We're past amendment.
Yeah.
We're at the voting stage.
So
We're past all
the-
amendments now.
The motion is to authorize the task force to submit the legislative concept. And,
Yes.
and it will go out to the HRC, but...
For information.
For sensitive information for them. That's perfect. So this is the approval for that task force to send out what they have developed. All in favor of that motion by show of hands and an eye?
Aye.
All against by a nay and show of hands?
Yeah.
Any abstentions by abstention or show of hands? Motion passes as such. Well, your second motion.
That the HRC authorize the Housing Rights Task Force to work with the Office of Equity and Human Relations to see that the issue of Section 8 ending Section 8 discrimination and ending the ban on inclusionary zoning are part of the city's legislative agenda.
Second.
Second.
Oh, no, second.
No second.
Okay. Discussion?
Do we really need a motion to do that? Or should we live out our partnership that we've been talking about all afternoon and assume that it is the right of any of our committees to call upon the office for dialogue, communication, and or coordination, whatever?
I think it would be nice to have direction from this group as to whether or not they feel like we should push this issue through with the office.
Okay.
Specifically, these issues.
Yeah, because we're talking about changing law.
Specifically, since we don't have a real agreement.
I think it should be along with the office. I think if we're proposing that, we also sometimes want to be one leading it. Yeah.
I think our best opportunity is to get on the city's legislative agenda, and the way we do that is have the Bureau submit.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So these are parallel efforts. So we submit our own, we work with the city. Our own is a placeholder in case nothing comes to the cities or nobody else will do it. Ready for vote? All those in favor of the task force working with the city to bring forward to the city legislative agenda, the Section 8 legislation and the mandatory inclusionary zone ban by a show of hands and an aye?
Aye.
Any opposed by a show of hands and a nay? And any abstentions? Thank you. All right, we are at 6:30, but we do have a couple of pieces of very important business that I would like to hold us for a few other minutes if we can. Maybe we have 10 more minutes to take care of some business. First, and let's do this very quickly if we can. I have a quick update on nominating committee. Is there any other? Do we know?
I have a motion.
A motion around nominating
from
committee?
the nominating
Wow.
committee. There are 5 commissioners whose terms end on October 31st. All 5 have submitted requests for reappointment. The nominating committee has voted that they should all 5 be reappointed. So the motion is that Alan Lazo, Kyle Bussey, Dale Bennett, Damon Isaiah Turner, and Ashley Horn be reappointed for a 3-year term that begins November 1st, 2012, which will end October 31st, 2015.
I would like that.
It comes from a committee.
Oh, right. All right, all in favor of the reappointment of those 5 commissioners as stated by the show of hands and an aye?
Aye.
Aye.
See the five.
Can they vote for themselves?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yes, we can.
Any against the motion? By a show of hands and a nay? Any abstention? I guess we probably should say. Ashley's going to abstain
Only because I thought I had.
out of ethics.
Ethics, very ethical.
All right, anything else from the nominating committee?
What's that?
Anything else from the nominating committee?
Oh, jeez.
So does that leave us with positions that will be vacant, that need filled?
As of this exact moment, we do not have any vacant positions.
CBRC.
Thank you. Hope we have enough time to do what we need to do here. Every one of you got a copy of our Community Police Relations Committee protocols. I don't know if you've got a chance to read it. Really, the critical points are Section 4B, authority, and Section C, role of the committee chair, and staff support, G, and the last section 5 about the media. I resonated really well with Kyle's angst about the accountability, which is very critically important to us. And I know that sometimes you just got to act quicker. But CPRC is really clear that it works on your behalf, and so that unless there is specific process in line, all of their policy recommendations will come to you for your approval. And actually, you're the ones who present it either to the City Council or to the Police Bureau, as we did with the youth support. So that's been something that's been very important for the committee, because we have 3 stakeholding groups in the Commission, Community, and the Bureau. And to do it any other way would be very, very impractical, and also it wouldn't help the process. So we've had this conversation around the table at CPRC, have determined that we are your committee, and that we definitely want to be an accountability line directly to you and through you out into the city, into the community, wherever our process will work. So these protocols were designed to make sure that that is really part of their living style. The authority is what I was talking about. There is one change that we're asking you to do. Or I guess it's not that. Where is it? Yeah, Section 3, that's the one. The last focus point, the chair of the Community and Police Relations Committee is an active member of the Human Rights Commission and is appointed to serve in this capacity by the chair of the Human Rights Commission. Again, we've had that discussion, and because of the 30 stakeholders acknowledging that this is your commission, it was not appropriate for someone not on the commission to chair, because chair would mean at that point being on the executive committee and things like that, which really isn't appropriate for a non-commissioned member to be. Other than that, it also protects the Bureau, and it protects the community. and it protects us too. So we put that in there, asking you to allow the chairperson to appoint the chair of this CPRC. Now, Alan suggested that requires a bylaw amendment. That'll be up to you. But basically, that's what we're hoping, and staff support, we're hoping that that takes place. And then the media, that's really critical for us. We want to make sure that only those people who have been designated as appropriate spokespersons to represent the commission, which is HRC, do so.
Where is that?
That's on the last, that's section 5. Section 5.
Yeah, there's a funny break. The bottom of the page 2 says section 5 header, and then the section 5 header actually starts on the next page.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all.
It's very, basically, it is basic. But that helps us rein ourselves in, because we do have some cowboys on our committee. And cowboys being, lone rangers who go out there and do their own thing, and they mean well, but sometimes it doesn't go through appropriate vetting by either the committee or definitely by you all. So we're asking for your approval of this protocols. I think it will continue to facilitate the work of that committee and also ensure that whatever comes from it is our product, not just a committee product.
Thank you, Hector. The one piece that, I think all of it is good. It's good, and I think that these type of, we might have this in general for all the committees at some point, because all of them stand and reflect the bylaws of the full HRC, except for the one point about that I mentioned earlier. The bylaws actually say that each committee elects its own chair. This is a change from that, and Hector's explained why. So I'm not sure if we need to change the bylaws, if we just adopt this, that it only applies to CPRC. I'm open to that question.
If we adopt this, I don't see that we need to change our bylaws, because if we are agree that this is how we're going to, this is the policy we're going to follow with CPRC, and we've adopted this, then that's what I don't see the bylaw changing that.
But the bylaws specifically state that each committee, we're going against something in the bylaws, because it states so I think we wouldn't have to change the bylaws.
Isn't that why we're voting for them? Because we wouldn't have to vote on it if we didn't do anything separate from the bylaws in the first place.
That's right. It would just default to the bylaw. Yeah. And I think there's a hierarchy, right, in law where
and I think that I don't disagree with that. Only why I disagree with that, and because the committee itself is requesting this.
Right.
That I see that if this is what they want and this is how they're saying this is how we're going to select, and so the bylaws say you guys can select, and now they say this is how we're going to select.
The bylaws say you can select.
Right, so the bylaws right now say that it's up to individual committees, subcommittees to determine how they select their own chair, yeah?
It says that they appoint their chair, yeah.
Okay. And so what they're doing now is they're saying this is how we want to do our appointment process, and we're not ratifying it.
Tricky lawyer.
Wow. Okay, so
Quick
that's an
question.
interesting point. Yes. So the conversation then is this how we want to how to allow CPRC to bring forward its leadership? Okay.
I was just curious about terms. Are term limits or delineations somewhere else, or is that?
No, there are no terms for committee members. It's open-ended.
For leadership.
They're open-ended.
So if somebody else from the HRC wanted to be part of that, they can, because there's already 5 members?
Yeah, there will be some, opening. The committee has in place a nominating process to receive nominations from the 3 stakeholders, and they will review it and then make their recommendations to CPRC, and they in turn will make them to you appoint.
So So there is term limitations based on the makeup of the committee by human rights commissioners. And so when a human rights commissioner term ends
Yeah.
here, then a spot will open on the CPRC.
We had a discussion about how the CPRC chooses to appoint its leadership, or anything else in the protocols.
I have a comment about choosing the chair, vice chair. I strongly disagree with that. So for me, it is after that, for me, my motto is human rights and leadership notion of involvement of the commission and fair input, then selection, instead of one person saying this is what I want and done. So that's why I'm against this.
So would your preference be for it to be either the CPRC or the full HRC commission?
There is two ways. If we want to avoid what Hector saying about liability, which I don't see, for me, fine by being by the commission, by the committee. So if we want to go from that way, it has to be the commission appointing. Everybody making the suggestion or saying or support appointment of this chair to be in that committee. So we're all taking the responsibility instead of just the chair making a call. Something doesn't work, would be like, why I should be responsible as a commissioner if the chair will make a call for that. So I want it to be fair, but also responsibility.
How does that fit for the CPRC members at this stage?
I would go with the writing protocol as President Johnson.
Could you say more about that?
Why? It's just a question of, one, trust. Two, I think it just facilitates the process. It just seems the committee works because there's a lot of engagement, there's a lot of energy, and so the less sort of allowing it to continue to work, I think is just really, I see this protocol as really just saying this is what we're doing right now, and I would just probably not mess with it. And I'm here, but I also think it's also a question that, so you would like the whole HRC to vote on who gets to be the chair. And I think we all have sort of that influence. I don't know if we can vote on it. I think we all have the influence in the way that we can discuss and talk. And I'm sure that, although it's not required, I think it's Alan, whoever is the chair of the HRC, when this issue comes up, you can certainly solicit input, and that could happen. And at any point in time, if we disagreed with something, any one of us could bring a motion back to the full commission, because this is just our own vote to undo it and doing something different. So we're not binding ourselves in any ways, whereas if we're in the bylaws, we're binding ourselves.
I'll keep it brief, but by principle, I share Nafdul's understanding of how the process should work, but I'm not a part of the CPRC, and so I can't speak from what's working, and I want to fix something that's not broke, basically. So it's already working, but I don't want that to be a standard process that we adopted in HRC, where one person is not out of any issue of trust or anything, but just I think it's better to have the inclusion of all as opposed to one person all aware of the process.
Part of the thinking also was that if we follow the bylaws, 2/3 of our committee would be disenfranchised because it couldn't stand for election for the chair. And so that was part of the process. The other reality is that because of our bylaws saying what it does, in many organizations, either the chair or the executive committee makes such appointments. Quite normative of committee leadership. So, we'll go with whatever you decide. So.
Here are my comments. Here's what I said in the beginning, I agree with Ashley. One, I am in the CPRC too. So there is nothing broken to fix, so why we don't leave it how it is with selecting that? So if we are having like 5 of us, because commissioners, we get to vote with the commission, other not, what about the chair of the Human Rights Commission voting, and the rest of the commission is, the committee is not? Where 5 of us, we know the officers, we know the community what they want. And part of the commission here, everybody being hearing their voice and sharing with them why we agree with supporting this person. So for me, either let's not change it, keep it as it is and the committee decides, or having the whole commission, not just one person. This is nothing has to do with the current chair or future chair. Or maybe future chairperson will say, no, that's by law, I'm following by law. I don't tell you guys. So that's what I either not broken why we fixing it, or we'll bring it to the whole commission to decide.
Can I call the question?
Yes. So Hector, on behalf of the CPRC, has brought these protocols before us. How many members do we have? On the commission. And as the question has been called as to whether or not we should accept these proposed protocols for CPRC as written. All those in favor of accepting the protocols as written by a show of hands and an eye?
Aye.
Aye.
All those against by a show of hands and a nay? Any abstention? Yeah.
No.
Maybe next. Okay. These are accepted and carried back to the CPRC as their proposal, as their protocols for how they operate.
Thank you very much for your work and also for your reflection on this very important. I'm not going to take the time to report on the work that has been done because that would take longer than we have. I did want to suggest to you that there is in place a summary of goals and training, which is a draft right now, but it basically is a working plan to carry out the initial commitment of the 5-year plan for institutional racism with the Bureau. And it's a very, it is a draft, and there's some thinking language here, so that's why we haven't shared it with you yet. They're continuing to work on it, but it outlines goals, scope of plan, framing, and it deals with impact on the Bureau and how does one prepare a Bureau to respond to institutional racism training. So that will be coming to you soon. The other thing is that I wanted Dante to be here to report on we have a committee, a subcommittee, and then subcommittee training working group. And were you at the last? I was not either, and I think Damon was there, and Dante. So I was going to ask Dante to give a report. Basically, they're putting together the training component for the command staff based on the first training we received from the Seattle plant. What they're doing is that they're orienting it towards the Bureau, the Portland Bureau, and the command staff. And that'll be the first of others, because everyone in the Bureau, all 9,000, how many others? 8,800? 900 police officers will be taking this training. That's just one component. Remember, we're also talking about the academy, we're talking about mandated training, we're talking about a number of recruiting, we're talking about how to address institutional racism in the Bureau holistically, with an H, holistically. And that's the intent. Another announcement. This is my last meeting with you. Officially, I will be through at the end of September. There's still some committee work that has to be done before that. But this will be my last meeting. I'll not take it. I have one more year, actually, but I am resigning effective September 30th. It's been great fun. I'm very impressed with where you all are, particularly the newer people. I love the older people around the table. We've had a journey together. It's been really, really incredible. But I love the energy and the creativity, just the thinking of you all.
literally and figuratively have enjoyed your voice. Which also means that there is an opening on the HRC.
Go back to work.
Nominating committee will activate itself, go through the process, and we will do a dual, it sounds like there may be some openings in CPRC, so there will be dual recruiting for CPRC.
We're not.
No, you don't recruit for them, but advertising-wise, no, we will, I think we should check in with them and see what their needs are also. Folks? Remember, 2 big events in September. Please attend as you can, and definitely the candidates forum. Thank you all.
How about 3 race talks?
Donna, I'm sorry. What is Race Talks this month? I know October is Race Are We So Different?
No, yes. It is immigration,
Before you leave.
the movie.
Oh, papers! Oh, September 11th. It's on 9/11.
Yeah.
I also have an mini announcement about the asset mapping. Is that cool? So we brought some questions for the people. Some of you have not filled them out. We brought copies. You can take them home, fill them, and then bring them the next meeting, or we can call you and follow up on that. So that's going to be really important for the discovery group to have that information, so to know who to talk to and who to connect for whatever we are working on. Amy has a copy. So
Yes.
we can use that.
Giallo.
And also, does anybody have a copy of the Race Power Religion? I wanted to watch it, maybe screen it at QSC.
I know.
I came to OHR not long ago to ask them, they didn't have a copy.
They don't have, they have
They
a
looked around
library.
at the library.
They have a library, but they should have some here, because we usually show it on the dialogue.
Yeah, I want to.